Welcome into Boxing Scene Today. Well, 168 pounds right now, a little bit up in the air. Of course, we all know about Crawford versus Canelo. Crawford coming out victorious. Now the man at 168 pounds. Don't know if he'll stay there. You know who won't be going back down there? David Benavidez, content to stay at 175 pounds. He says, that's my destiny. What are his options at 175? And who might go down to 68 if he's not going to? To help me break it down, Jimmy Smith in studio with the champ, Paulie Malignaggi, also joined by the champ, Chris Algieri, joining us via Zoom. Paulie, no surprise here. When you go up in weight class, your body just doesn't want to go back down again. Benavidez has looked good at 175 pounds, taking on Anthony Yarde later on in the year. Does he have more options at 75? Is that why he's staying up there partially?
I don't know if he has more options, but I think the body also tells you, the option to go to 68 may not be there. He was a big 68 pounder. It was that was kind of obvious to us when we would see him fight at 168. And so when you're that big at a weight class, typically it starts to become a struggle more and more. The more the years pass by, your body sort of wants to hold that bigger weight. We know that. We've been there. So I just think that I'm not sure that more options are at 75, actually. There's a lot of good options at 68. But if your body can't get there, especially can't get there healthily, then, you're going to put yourself more at risk.
But what I'm curious about, and Chris, I want to ask you about this, is Crawford a big fight draw at 68? And what I mean by that is, yes, he had the big upset against Crawford, but is he the kind of guy who's going to lure people into the weight class? Or is he, as Canelo said, he's great. He's an all-time great, but he's not big enough for 68 that I'll get the credit necessarily for beating him. Can he draw guys into 68 if he decides to stay there?
Well, he can if Turkey decides that he wants someone to fight him because the price tag will be there. So he wanted the Benavidez fight. This is Turkey speaking. He wanted that Benavidez fight for Crawford. So yeah, it would have made sense financially for Benavidez if he could make the fight. And I agree with you, champ. I don't think it has to do with options. I don't think it has to do with money. I don't think it has to do with opportunities. It has to do with what his body can and cannot do. And I think at this age, at this stage of his career, 168 is not even in discussion anymore. And I think it's really smart that Benavidez is taking that route and not trying to make his body do something it doesn't want to do. It makes me think of Chad Dawson when he went down to fight Andre Ward and was just a shell of himself, or Roy Jones when he came back down from heavyweight down to 75 to fight Antonio Tarver. You see some great fighters really strain themselves to make weight classes that their body don't want to. And then you get performances that are not up to the caliber that they've given us in the past. So I think it's really smart for Benavidez. And this is the way Benavidez moves, man. I love the way he moves. I love the way he talks. I love the career paths that he's chosen. He's going to stay at 175. There's a lot of good options up there. Obviously, we've got the Bivol Beterbiev fight that's just looming. I really like this Anthony Yarde fight. I'm a big fan of Anthony Yarde and his style. I think it's a really good mesh of styles with Benavidez and Yarde. So I think that's going to be a good fight. It's going to get more attention to him. But I think there's plenty of good fights at 75. Are they as good as the fights and are the opportunities at 68? No. But if you can't make it, you can't make it. So I think we're in a completely different discussion now with Benavidez. And I'm glad that he came out and said it flat out. Nope, not happening. Not fighting Crawford. Not going down to 68. Don't want to do that anymore. I'm staying at 75.
Yeah, but of course, David Morrell, of course, an opponent of Benavidez beat him, has talked about going down to 68. Now that you have Crawford, now that you might have some names that make it a little juicier now that Canelo's out. Paulie, this is exactly what you talked about with Canelo. You said, all right, if Crawford does beat him, at least it might free up the opportunities for other guys to come in and have some advantages. Do you put, obviously, David Morrell in that category?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a 168-pound division with a lot of good fighters, a lot of good contenders, a lot of possible matchups that weren't being made because everybody was trying to wait for the opportunity to maybe get a shot at Canelo in the titles. Now that we finally rid ourselves of this problem at 168, everybody's going to fight each other. And there's a lot of good fights to be made. There's a lot of head-to-head matchups that can be made that are going to be fun. We saw one of them on the undercard with Lester Martinez taking on Mbili. I think Morrell joining the fray, possibly taking on, I don't know, a Diego Pacheco, for example,
sure,
things like that. There's guys in that mix, and I think Morrell fits in nicely there. He can make the weight. He's mentioned he can make the weight. Bob Santos, who we had here during the Canelo fight, also has said, who trains David Morrell, he said,
he was chopping at the bit for his guy.
He may
consider
having Morrell go back down to 168. So that is a guy that can make the weight and will willingly go back down and make the weight. And that was a guy who was forced up to 175 because he couldn't get the shot at Canelo. So again, it's an example of how this guy Canelo was holding up the entire weight class and sort of making what would have otherwise been a very fun weight class and making it stagnate and like a monkey wrench. You put it into the mix, and now you've released a monkey wrench and the wheels turn, and the 168-pound division can breathe again. And I think you're going to get a lot of good fights.
When you look at it, Chris, in terms of the future for Benavidez at 175 pounds, he looked absolutely fantastic against Morrell. He's big, he's fluid, he throws good combinations. combinations. He's fast on the inside. When it's all said and done, let's say if he gets past his Anthony Yarde fight, you told us you're a big fan of him. Him and Bivol, a victorious Bivol would make the most sense if he can get past Benavidez, which is not exactly a chip shot for their third fight. What do you see about his future the next year and a half at 175?
I mean, obviously, he's got to get past Anthony Yarde, and by all intents and purposes, he should. But I think it'll be a very exciting fight. And then it goes on to the bigger, better things. And I think either way, Bivol or Beterbiev, I want to see Benavidez with all those guys. And I think that the boxing public would want that as well. You want to see him against the top guys, and he's always willing to fight those top guys. So it shouldn't be that hard to make. They're going to be the last men standing. So, let's make it happen. And I just want to touch on David Morrell a little bit in comparison to David Benavidez, their performances at 175. Benavidez looked really good at 75. And Morrell, who has normally looked so dominant, looked, I don't want to say ordinary. He looked great, but he just didn't look as dominant as he did at 168. So his return to 68 opens up a lot of things. And Benavidez, obviously it's working at 75, so I don't think there's any reason for him to even attempt about going back down or talking about that. I think he's in his new home at 175, and there's a lot of good fights to be made.
When you look at the comparison between the two fighters, Paulie, explain to an audience that might not get it, and right now you're cutting weight, you understand completely, there's a huge difference between a natural 75 and a puffed up 168. A guy who's maybe putting on mass, putting on muscle, but doesn't have the frame for it. Benavidez had the frame for it a little more than Morrell, and we saw that when they both fought.
Yeah, I think the difference is when your body says no more, even losing 2 pounds becomes super, super difficult. While when your body says, I've seen regular fans talk about, 2 pounds, and they're like, "Oh, I lose 2 pounds." Like, oh, yeah, buddy, you lose 2 pounds like that. When your body has lost already 30, and then you got 2 more to go, and your body says no more, even 2 more is too much. That 2 pounds can feel like you're losing 10 pounds. It can feel destructive to you, So it's at that point where, for Benavidez, that's where it is, from 75 to 68. That's a struggle right there. That's a big, big struggle. You consider it, you say, I may be able to make it, but what's going to be left of me if I make it, Or I may try to make it. I may not even make it. I may attempt to make it. I may not make it. You're in that point where you try to wonder if it's worth the trouble to try to make 68, if it's worth the pain to make the lower weight class. And then you got to consider those 2 factors. Do I make it and I'm weak, or do I try to make it and then don't even make it and then get stuck not even making it for a fight that I signed a contract for? So
How about make it and get hurt?
Yeah.
You put yourself in a really dangerous place when you dehydrate the brain. It is the juice worth the squeeze. And sometimes we're talking, and in boxing, unfortunately, we're talking about your life is on the line.
Yeah, and that's again where the weigh-in games come into play. That's another game altogether. Where they just keep making the weigh-ins. By the next decade, we're gonna have the weigh-ins a week before the fight, and then we're not even gonna have weight classes, right? The way they keep going that way, you keep trying to make up one thing and you cause another problem in another way, but. In reality, weight classes are there for a reason. They should be enforced, and if the rightfully enforced, a fighter has to then consider in an intelligent way whether he should make it the weight or he should move up in weight, or in this case Benavidez, who's been fighting at 175. Can I then stay at 175, or can I make 168? It's a big proposition. It's a big thing to consider. And for Benavidez to say, I'm done, I'm staying at 175, it probably means that he probably doesn't even make 175 so easily. Because that's the thing about moving up in weight. Right. Just because you move up in weight doesn't mean you now make the weight easy. It's just you struggle less. That's how much we cut weight as fighters. We don't, just because you move up in weight, like, oh, now I don't have to cut weight anymore, I just make weight. No, it's not like that. You're cutting weight regardless. It's just now the weight cut is more manageable because you moved up another weight class. You're always cutting weight. Getting in shape is what, part of getting in shape is cutting weight.
And also, Chris, you're kind of the resident nutritionist, you're the resident fitness expert in this group. Guys have to put on more muscle because they're taking on bigger guys, and you have to cut down from that muscle. It's a 75 pounder is not a puffed up 68. He is a bigger, more muscular guy. Explain that.
I mean, we just saw that with Terence Crawford.
Yes.
Terence Crawford didn't look undersized at 68 against Canelo. Granted, Canelo's not a big 68 pounder, but Crawford spent the year out of the ring packing on good quality weight. He didn't look soft. He didn't look like a puffed up 54 pounder. He looked like a solid, strong, probably middleweight, like 60. And he did, yes, obviously he was fighting out of his weight class to a degree, but he looked bigger than he did at 54. He looked like a real middleweight. He looked physically strong, obviously, but also stylistically, he was able to maintain his athleticism, his movement. And Champ, to your point, even for that, like we were talking about, how he looked prior to the fight. Guess what? Crawford still had to cut weight to make 68. Guys, he didn't just walk in there. He doesn't just weigh 68. He's probably walking around the high 70s, maybe even low 80s. So even him moving up 3 weight classes, you still have to trim down and cut back the fat because you spent that year packing on quality muscle. But you're also going to add some body fat as you're gaining more lean tissue. And then you need to cut back on the body fat and make sure that you keep as much lean tissue as possible. It's really a fine line, when it comes to gaining and losing weight and trying to get into a position to make a weight class. So even a guy like Crawford who moved up 3 weight classes, he was still cutting down from a higher weight class to step on the scale that day.
One of the discussions that I would have loved to have with you guys, I was in Dubai for a few days last week. When you talk about the Hall of Fame class,
this guy, see how you? Oh yeah.
I was in Dubai hanging out with Rich Bill. Have you ever driven a Bugatti? Kind of stiff, little stiff. They don't handle as well as I thought they would.
This guy.
Moving on, man. Anyway, so just strippers and having fun. Anyway, I'm sorry, I got confused. My point is,
on the road to riches and diamond rings.
That's all I was doing. But this idea that we didn't discuss. One of my favorite fighters of all time, Vernon Forrest, of course, up for the Hall of Fame, didn't get his real opportunity until he's about 30 years old, which a lot of fighters are past their prime at that point. This idea that Benavidez is 28, are their wheels turning in the right time for him to get the big fights while he's still in his prime, Paulie? Because we've seen fighters, as you said, Canelo kind of locked up the division. They don't get free until their early 30s and don't break.
I've seen that even with Demetrius Andrade. I saw that. Demetrius Andrade.
Another good example.
I remember in the amateurs, he was a nightmare for everybody to deal with. And he wasn't in my amateur generation. He was in the amateur generation after me. And I remember hearing about him in the pros, So he was a monster that never really got his opportunities at the right time, or even in the adequate weight class. When
Aaron Pryor, when I was a kid, he just never got the. Are those wheels turning for Benavidez?
And there's usually a guy freezing guys like that out. In this case, Canelo froze out a couple of them. He froze out Andrade, and then he froze out Benavidez. You know what I mean? Which is, again, when you people at home wonder, when you groupies at home wonder why I have criticism for a guy like Canelo, is because he has really stalled these weight classes almost completely when he was fighting in them. And giving guys who like Gervonta Davis, sometimes guys you never even heard of or barely know, and giving them the shots when there's guys rightfully around that area that would make massive matchups. So it's an issue, and Benavidez certainly deserves to be able to have the opportunity and to be able to come out of it. But yeah, it's 75, and it's a different proposition altogether. The yard fight, I think, is a solid jump point here. He beat Vosdick. That was a solid opponent as well.
Good win.
Good win. I think Yard is gonna. Yard. One thing about Yard is always in a fun fight. So and Benavidez is in fun
I love
fights.
Anthony Yard.
So I think
Fun.
it's a shootout type of fight. You expect Benavidez to come out of it, but not without some problems, and not without the big effort from Yard. I enjoyed watching Yard. I enjoy watching Benavidez, and that's why that's in a matchup that I'm going to enjoy watching. And we'll see what Bivol and Beterbiev end up doing against one another once Beterbiev gets through this warm up fight, and we'll go from there. I think that matchup can be made, but we'll see how they look leading into it.
I have the same question for you, Chris. The idea that the gears are now turning. Benavidez is 28 years old. Is the division opening up? We're starting to see the big fights right at the time where he can maybe capitalize. Late 20s, start getting that man strength, Chris. You know that.
Well, yeah, he's he's still got a lot of prime left. He's just entering his prime, 28. You mentioned guys, I didn't get my shot till I was 30, and I burned a lot of my prime, prior to that, getting that position, just because I was chomping at the bit and not getting my opportunities.
This guy was also beating guys up in kickboxing too.
Kickboxing guys,
You did. There is that little tidbit too. You were in a little sport.
There's a whole nother sport where a part of my, I was really young then. I wasn't in my physical prime then. I could barely grow a mustache. I was a 2-time world champion kickboxer. But my physical prime for boxing, I really didn't get my title shot or any kind of shot until I was 30. But Benavidez is still 28, so he still has a lot of prime left. You can get a lot done in 3-4 years, and as long as he can make these big fights happen. And it seems like this Anthony Yard is going to be a nice springboard because, one, it's access to the European, UK fan base, which is awesome. So now if you weren't familiar with David Benavidez, now you're going to be, because you're going to be fighting one of their guys. On top of it, it's a potential fight of the year type matchup because both these guys throw a ton of punches. Anthony Yarde is like super explosive, always in fun fights, like you said, champ. So that's going to be a nice introduction to the world post, Canelo freezing him out. So David Benavidez now not interested in 168, fighting at 160 at 175. Looks to be the guy to beat once you look past number 1 and number 2, which is Bivol and Benavidez. And really, it might be David Benavidez either. Anyway, I could see him beating both of those guys. I'm not saying he would, but I could see it. It's not a crazy thought to have in your head. But I would like to see him fight all of those guys. And the way that David Benavidez and his team move, I'll tell you right now, he's willing to fight everybody as well. He's a line him up kind of guy. I'll fight him next, then I'll fight him this. After that, I only want tough fights. That's what David Benavidez and his team are all about. And that's exactly what you want from a champion and a guy who potentially could be the face of boxing. I really think David Benavidez has all the chops to be that guy. We're looking for a new face. We got Gervonta Davis who's leaving. We got Canelo Alvarez who just got beat by Crawford. Crawford doesn't seem like he's going to be sticking around for long. So there is an opening for a face of boxing. I think David Benavidez could be that guy to step in.
So let me get this straight. Fight of the year candidates as the year closes down. We've got Eubank versus Ben.
Sure.
We got Emiliano Moreno and Raul Garcia.
Yep.
And then as the year closes out, possibly Benavidez Yarde.
I think it looks good.
Not a bad year.
Not a bad year. Let's see if Benavidez Yarde lives up to it. The other two are smokers of fights, man. I mean, the other dudes, the fire is still burning with the other two. It's still hot if you start watching those fights, So if Benavidez and Yarde lives up to what those two fights did, some good candidates for fight of the year.
And then we still have Eubank Ben too.
Is that this year or next year?
Yeah, that's this year.
That's
coming up in the next month or so.
Oh wow, man! They really, that one snuck up on me.
It's gonna be a great year. That's why I keep you informed. That's why you watch Boxing Scene Today, to keep you informed of all the boxing news coming up. That's right. You do the same. Be like Paulie. Watch Boxing Scene Today. Keep up with your boxing news. Find out while millions are watching. It's gonna be a great year. Great year, Paulie.
Yeah, good close.
I'm not arguing.
Close of the year.